Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, hello and welcome to what is an emergency podcast. Scott went to the top of Rennie Towers and he pressed the big light that shone into the sky that called us all together so we could do a pod. That's ridiculous. I was trying to think
That's
of what
terrible.
comedy light would be
It
shone
was.
into the sky, but I can't think of anything other than a glass of wine for you. Um, so my name's Al Coates, podcast host. I'm with my colleague Scott Rennie, but I've got two guests with me today who've initiated the emergency podcast. So over to you guys. Who's who?
So I'm Clare Solomon. I'm an adoptive mum to two daughters, and upon the announcement from the government about the changes to the ASGSF on the 14th of April, I decided that I felt compelled to take some action and to set up a protest march and a petition, and we've since formed a team of parents.
Excellent.
Campaign, if you like. That's who I am.
So, that's smashing. And who are you?
I'm Euan Preston. I'm just here for the wine. I saw a light in the sky in the shape of a glass of wine, and I thought this sounds like fun.
It's only 5 o'clock, Euan, for goodness sake.
It's late. So I'm an adoptive dad of two teens, and I'm also chair of the Potato Group, who many people may know. And I saw on Facebook a campaign had started around changes to the ASGSF. So I sent a message saying, please, can I get involved? And Claire very kindly said yes.
Excellent. We might have to unpick the whole potato group thing because for years we've tried to get someone from the potato group on, and you finally come by stealth or by accident. We're not sure which one. So we might be unpick that.
Don't make it awkward, Al. Don't make it awkward. We know why they've never been on before. And it's all your fault. So,
sorry, Euan. Would you like to come back at us?
Shall I give you a quick introduction to potato?
That would maybe help, yeah.
So for those who don't know, the Potato Group, it's one of those names which when I say I volunteer with a group called the Potato Group, people go, oh, that sounds fun. And I have to say, well, wait until you understand what the name stands for. It's an acronym that stands for Parents of Traumatized Adopted Teens Organization. So we are a growing peer-to-peer support organization. We tend to support families who have reached real crisis with their generally teens and young adults. We do have some members whose young people are showing a really high level of need prior to becoming teens, but for the most part, it is teenagers and young adults. So yeah, we provide peer-to-peer support, and then also we are sort of increasingly doing projects that have a sort of an outward face. So a little bit of sort of campaigning and some education. We had a professionals conference last year. We, as part of that, we've got some researchers who are members who carried out two pretty big research projects, which are currently in the peer review process, and we're hoping to publish those in May. They represent the experiences of 438 of our members, parenting 690 children, and it's pretty stark reading. So we will hopefully be sharing that in sort of late May.
Excellent. We will get you back on. And so I guess the whole issue around the Adoption Special Guardianship Support Fund sits really squarely within your community, the community of families that you represent and collate. And so perhaps in a nutshell then, Claire, what are you going to do? And why are you going to do it? Well, not in a nutshell. Go for it. Speak for as long as little as you want.
Okay. So from a personal perspective, I have used the ASGSF and found it transformative for my family. So we found ourselves in crisis, I suppose, between 4 and 5 years ago, with our 4-year-old daughters then living in total crisis, in a sort of almost permanent state of fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
And it had a pervasive impact across all areas of their lives and our lives. And ultimately, by the time they were 6, meant that they were outside of the education system or outside of school, without a school, with an EHCP. And we've been unable to secure school provision since. However, yeah, it took us some time, but once we managed to get funding through the ASGSF, and we utilised the match funding side of the ASGSF, so that's obviously been completely scrapped. Yeah. We started to get a robust therapy package in place that has worked fantastically well. It takes time and it's progress little by little, and it's never sort of linear. You go forwards, backwards, but generally in the right direction. And we now have children that are much more emotionally regulated. We have support as parents ourselves. They are in alternative provision that is going to go up to 4 days a week, and they're able to access learning. And we're probably on the precipice of getting back into education, and they've literally just turned 9. So I think in England or in the UK, you don't think one of the biggest challenges facing you is going to be getting your children in education. But for us, the ASGSF has played a pivotal role, and our therapy team have played a pivotal role in getting us out of crisis, supporting our children, and getting us to the point where we can hopefully get them back in education. But yeah, the modalities of treatment we're having require long-term, consistent input. And the way in which these changes have come about, we didn't know what was happening with the fund, did we?
Yeah.
And so that we knew already, and we knew from previously, so 3 years ago when there was a wait to find out what would happen with the fund, that it often leads to long delays and these sort of artificial gaps in therapy, if you like, where families are in therapy, and if it was just about meeting needs, it would happen consistently, but you end up with these 5-6 month gaps every time there's nobody knows what's happening with the ASGSF, because applications have to go on hold and then they open again. So I was already concerned about this back in January when we didn't know what was going to happen. There was those delays, and then ultimately the announcement that came on the 14th of April. So we were told the fund would continue, but nothing opened. Then the announcement came, and it was done, as far as we know, without consultation with the sector at all. And I believe that it has the potential to cause significant harm to the children and families that it has been serving, and that it would serve, that they haven't used it yet. So for kinship families, for adoptive families, I think this decision really could cause significant harm to families. For that reason, yeah, I felt compelled to take some action, and that's been in the form of a petition and a march. It's been at a fast pace. This is nothing I have experience in. It's a steep learning curve. We really are, we're running and we're doing, everything's coming together. But yes, so we have a petition online that is now over 7,500 signatures. We want to keep pushing that. We want people to sign it, share it. The more signatures, hopefully the more chance of change. And we've set up a march that's happening on the 3rd of May at 1 o'clock to Downing Street, where we will deliver the petition. And we have 3 kind of core aims. We would like an immediate reversal of the changes made to the ASGSF. We would like the government to immediately reverse those, and reinstate what was. And once it's done that, to hold a sector-wide consultation over the next 12 months, so that any changes that do come afterwards are informed by the sector and the users of this, the professional sector, if you like. And then we'd like any future changes on hold until appropriate planning and preparation and resourcing is in place, that these changes can be made without the damaging effects that I think will come about as a result of the way this change has been made, abruptly, without warning, without any preparation, and so on. Yeah.
I mean, that seems like a pretty clear ask, really, in terms of, immediate reversal, 12-month consultation, and then future changes to be sort of put on hold until that consultation is complete. Euan, what are your people saying?
Al, you just froze. Did that question come to me?
It did, yeah. I was saying, Euan, what are your people saying?
Well, so just first off, I just want to apologise to Clare for the fact my alarm went off in the middle of her response there. I just wanted to add some urgency to this. It was reminding me that I need to go pick up my dog. I'm sure the dog will understand. No, I've already picked up the dog. I just forgot to cancel my alarm. Overall, look, I've spent the last week speaking with families, with practitioners, with people in various professional roles, and overall the sense is really devastation. I spoke with a dad this morning who they spent 4 years trying to get the right support for their children who have a very high level of need, and really they're struggling, they're seriously struggling. And they spent 4 years. They finally found a therapist that they thought was going to work. They've obviously been on hold because of the uncertainty around whether or not the fund was going to be renewed. So there was all of the anxiety around that. And when this was announced, and when they were told that the application that they had made was now going to have to be made again, they were going to have to go back to square one, but also that the treatment that they were hoping to receive, which was DDP, the current fair access limit, not including assessment, which they were on the cusp of embarking on a multidisciplinary assessment, just the treatment would result in 14 sessions of treatment. And as you know, DDP is a long-term therapy by design. And so that's really thrown into question what they're going to have access to. And the phrase that this parent used was he felt like the light at the end of the tunnel had been extinguished, and he was really distressed. So that has been pretty much the feeling among families and among parents, real frustration, but also among practitioners who have set up their practice in order to meet this need that they recognize requires this high level of intervention, and who, frankly, I've had conversations with some who aren't sure that they're going to be able to continue to practice because it won't be sustainable. The fear around that is that if we see real high quality practitioners having to leave this space, it's going to leave a vacuum. And the question around that is, what's going to fill that vacuum? Is it going to be that they have to provide lower quality therapy and treatment because it has to be contained within a much lower number of sessions? Or is it going to be that practitioners of a lower quality come into the space and start to deliver that work? So yeah, I mean, across the board, just real anxiety.
I was looking at Scott there. I thought you were about to ask a question.
No, I'm just here to listen. So you said, so I'm sure something will come up soon. No, just before you go on, I mean, I'm quite critical of the ASGSF because I feel like it's just gone on forever where they've not really kind of bottomed out how it's going to be funded, how, permanent funding, the fair access limit was as far as I remember, it was supposed to be kind of a bit of a temporary measure, and then it became a permanent thing. I could be wrong on that one, but and to me, and we talked about it very briefly a couple of weeks ago. This situation that we're facing should have been sorted out a long time ago. If governments are going to fund things that are really a key part of a certain communities' needs for their children and young people to stop various different things, breakdowns and kind of going into the judiciary system and all these kinds of things, which to me is what the ASGSF is for, as well as, like you were saying, Claire, giving a reasonable family life, quality of life, keeping them in education and stuff like that. So to me, in some ways, there is a failure here. And it's not something, it's not like I don't want to compare it to anybody's kind of income that the government have cut since the new government came in, but it's a little bit like the the heating allowance that got cut
Mm.
for the older generation. I don't know what we're calling them these days. Don't want to offend anybody. This isn't like that. This is a really important part of children who've been in the care system and children who have found permanence, whether it be kinship or adoption or special guardianship. So to me, it's just been left to go too long. And in actual fact, there's a massive failure here, not just from this government, but for the previous one as well, because there should have been a permanent plan put in place for this money to be secure. And I know Al kind of argues with me about the spending reviews and stuff like that, but I still think there should have been something kind of more permanent put in place a long time ago.
I agree, and I think it's really important to recognise that we are Claire is leading this campaign to have changes to the ASGSF reversed, but families don't really care where this provision of support is coming from. And I agree that there seems to have been a failure of strategic long-term planning by government.
Mm.
And critically, the bit that has caused so much anxiety and continues to is no communication from government. If we are to see a transition from provision as it currently stands, or as it was prior to March 31st this year, if we're to see a transition, we need clear communication about what that's going to look like. And currently, the communication is as much as practitioners are being told not to plan any treatment beyond March 2026. That's all we know.
Yeah.
So the practitioners can't put long-term planning in place around therapy. And families are left wondering what is going to be available, not only beyond then, but what is available now. So it is a real failure, I believe. But the key point is, as I understand it, ASGSF was only ever supposed to be short-term. But without that communication and strategic planning, it clearly that the infrastructure that's grown up around that can't adapt to it. It's going to take time. We think about regional adoption agencies potentially investing in their own capabilities. Well, they're not going to be able to do that because they don't know what's coming. I imagine, so it has been. But just to come back to my initial point, whether it's the ASGSF or whether it's delivered by regional adoption agencies, it doesn't matter to the families. What they need to know is that they're going to have their young people are going to have access to timely, good quality, effective support, and really talking to families, and especially the families within our organisation. The strong feeling is that until they had access to ASGSF funded specialist interventions, they hadn't found anything that worked. And that is a really scary place for us to be in terms of communicating that with parents who don't yet have access and haven't had access in the past.
Yeah. Claire.
Yes.
So in terms of, I mean, Euan's given a nice summary of that, but in terms of the people who are coming, I'm sort of, I looked at Scott, we had a chat and we said, look, if I was near, I would come, but I can't. So are you anticipating a lot of people turning up on the Saturday the 3rd?
I'm hoping so, yes. We're certainly seeing interest in different forms on our social media, on Facebook. There's lots of registered interest. Some people that have committed to the word going, the button of going. But we are getting a lot of contact from families, therapists, etc., social workers, all of whom generally are saying we're coming and we're bringing a carload or a coach load. But I have never, I must say, I'm a mum, and historically I've had to give up work, but I was a paediatric nurse before. I haven't done anything like this before. I don't have a reference point. It's not like I've organised 3 marches before and you can start to get a feel for, right, there's this level of interest, so I can expect this many people. So I don't know is the honest answer.
I
Yeah,
mean, if
and because that was my comment the other day, and like say, forgive me for saying it, but it was like, well, in in terms of our kind of community, we are quite small in the grand scheme of the population. Let's be, honest. So, you know, in terms of you would have to be quite close or have a really big group of you, which is possible. And I think that's what I reflected on after I'd said it the other night that, there is a potential here for maybe for at least 50 or 100 people. And that's quite big for our community to turn out to somewhere to do that. So,
mm,
I hope that's the least you get when it goes ahead. But you know what, Claire, we do that with the podcast, and we've been doing this for years. We just hope for the best every time we do it, and that's how you learn.
Yeah,
Partly
and
that's
I would hope that that is the least that we're going to get.
yeah.
500 people. I'm certainly optimistic it will be more than
Mm,
that. But do you know what? If it's 5 people
yeah,
and we can reach some adopters and kinship families, and they can feel that their voice is being amplified and that they're seen and they're heard,
yeah.
and that people care about what happens to their families and
mm,
how we can help their families, that's fine for me.
I think
Absolutely.
I think the strength of feeling behind this is so significant that we're going to see probably a few more than we might, be sort of hoping for. And certainly, like, some of the bigger names in terms of organizations who support families within adoption and kinship have themselves stated that their own people are coming. So
Mhm.
fingers crossed we get
Yeah.
at least 20.
but
I'm bringing my own family. We'll
yeah,
probably hit that number.
yeah. I think it is really interesting because I think that it feels to me, sort of having thought about it an awful lot and thought about actually there's the interplay of so many factors here that
Yeah,
have
there is. Yeah.
converged onto this one issue,
Mhm.
and it feels in terms of it's so easy to then for politicians to be caught up in the kind of the funding routes and the bigger philosophical questions. I was walking the dog this morning and I had this thought, and I thought, actually, the Tories had a very much privatized model, a Labour wanting to make it a much more sort of a public sector model, because the truth is probably that a local authority can provide the same. If it had the resources, it could provide as good a service for less money. The
Yeah.
Tories wanted to privatize it. But in some ways, that's irrelevant actually at this point, as you said, Euan, because actually it's about families today, tomorrow, next week, next month, who are kind of going, this has become an essential part of our lives now, children's welfare. That
Yeah.
was a kind of a question. You can come off the back of it if you want. No, it's fine. Doesn't matter.
I would say, just back to that, as we're speaking to that, that if that is the model that Labour wants to move to, that's where our kind of third point about the planning, the preparation, the resourcing, and the time needed, that needs to come first, and then the change. This
Yeah.
is change without consultation, and we don't know, and that's a very different thing.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, is the point that the actual figures seem to have been completely arbitrary. I mean, I've spoken to people in lots of contexts where you would have assumed there would have been some consultation taking place, and there doesn't seem to have been, as Claire's already said. But also, it's an arbitrary amount that it's been reduced by, and something that I find quite frustrating as well within some of the communications around it is this sort of statement that it's a 40% reduction. But it's not, because in the first year, there's the £2,500 ring fenced for specialist assessment. And speaking with providers, very often they've said that with many of the children with the highest level of need, that £2,500 just goes nowhere. Many of them are actually doing work unpaid, and I've spoken with lots of parents who can attest to the fact that ASGSF practitioners over the years have done a lot of unpaid work and advocacy. So, when I've spoken with providers and I've said, well, the previous amounts, was that enough? And they just go, no, it just didn't come close, especially for the children with a higher level of need. So we're seeing a reduction in the first year from £7,500 potentially down to 3,000. And if you need to build assessment into that £3,000 does not go very far.
Mm.
What families are being faced with is the possibility that they may have to choose between either assessment or treatment. Treatment without diagnosis is malpractice. assessment, well, I think it's ethically dubious to be assessing young people and then making them potentially wait a whole year, and who knows where we'll be in a year's time, but wait for treatment. So it feels to me that this is completely unworkable. And I would love to know what thought went into the amounts that have been made available. And the other point that we hear a lot is that this change is about giving access to a greater number of families, and obviously that's something that we all want to see, and especially since ASF then became ASGSF, so special guardianship and kinship have been included, which is absolutely right, and that should be the case. But the fund hasn't grown in terms of the overall quantity available. So it's breadth but losing depth, and that's it's again, talking to practitioners. Effectively, what we're doing is we're removing those effective treatments that our families have really benefited from, because you just cannot deliver those treatments with this amount of money, with this fair access limit.
I'm going to push back against that slightly, if I dare. And I do. I've had actual practice. I've had practitioners as well say to me, sort of quite quietly, and say, "Actually, that's fine. I can bear that. You get an awful lot of therapy for £3,000. You an awful lot of support." And I think one of the negative aspects of the ASF has been that if people know how much money they can claim, and so they've claimed it. And I think that has, and I'm not in any way accusing. This is not universally true, and I'm hoping it's kind of a minority, but I think that it's created a marketplace where people know what they can charge for therapy. And that's why I say local authorities, I think, can provide a better service. And I have actually reported some organisations for profit gouging. But also some of the evidence is really quite uncertain about the benefit of the ASF. I know anecdotally on an individual level, people say, well, it's been incredibly helpful. But when you deep dig down, you discover that some of the incidental stuff that comes with the therapeutic intervention is often as helpful. So that might be social care professionals who come and are interested in you, listen to you, believe you, validate your position. Just the ongoing professional contact, regardless of the model of intervention, ongoing positive interested professional contact has a huge benefit. So the evidence is really uncertain about why it works, but we know it does work. So all I'm kind of suggesting is that perhaps if that money were to be, because perhaps that is the idea, that in the future that money is going to be split across the 33 RAAs, and and you're absolutely right, it should have been communicated. The intention or the hope or the aspiration or even just the idea we're going to think about it should be communicated. But if you then move to a model, the 1st of April next year, where you had local authorities who were able to pick up that slack and have more staff who were able to provide that ongoing service, you might see that a lot of those needs are being met. That was a statement. I'm not defending the government, because I think their communication needs is shocking. They should be able to be taken out and have hosed down, if I can say that. So there you go. There's me defending the government. I apologise.
But I think what you're saying is very important, and I think we do need to see good quality data coming out of this, and I don't know what, if any, research is being carried out into those various factors that you were talking about, and especially into what is it that makes it effective. I think that's something that we really, really definitely do need to know. Just if I may just jump to the defense of many providers, they tend to be community interest companies. They tend to be not for profit. My experience personally with practitioners who work in this space is that professional ethics is something that's very high in terms of their values, and so I would hope it would be a smaller number who would take advantage of it. They're typically not used car salesmen. They're typically fairly trustworthy people. But I agree that there may be efficiencies found by a different model of delivering. But just to come back to my point from earlier, which is, frankly, parents just don't care. They want the needs of their children understood, addressed, met, and that long-term support. So, I agree. If that's a better way of delivering it, then that's what we should pursue.
Yeah. Scott, do you want to tell me off for what I've just said?
No, I don't think I do, actually.
Just,
I think
he can do that. I'll get a
I,
stern
No,
text.
I think evidence is an interesting thing here, because there's clearly more research needed in this area, isn't there? There's some,
yeah,
and some that I have seen
yeah.
Adds weight to the fact that the right interventions make a significant difference in multiple areas. And also, yeah, is there what evidence is there?
And the thing is, the pilot of the ASF, that was all, there was a load of research done after that, and that was, things were jotted around, blah blah blah. Even if you look back on that very original research, not research review, I don't know what you call it. Um, there was an immediate need. There was an immediate kind of impression that yes, this is needed, which is why it's kept on going. But going back to my earlier point, using the word that Euan used, strategic. There was no strategic planning in this. There was no long-term thinking. It was let's dodder around year to year. Let's do exactly the same thing that we do every other year. We'll go silent until they start kicking up. And when I say kicking up, I'm talking about organizations like Adoption UK and Quorum, and I'm not sure if Bath was still around when that, but Coram Bath and all that sort of stuff, saying, what's happening with this? And then parents like you, Claire, who have benefited from it. Your family's benefited from this fund. It's taken that long for them to start kicking up, for them to go, oh yeah, we better announce that now. Now, as far as I'm aware, there has been no consultation, and I'm not sure, Al, even if you know about that, because even the ARG, I'm not even sure if that's still going. So,
No, I
there never
can
has
say
been.
that.
Even when I was in the ARG, we never got consulted on it. We were told when it was about to be announced, but we were never consulted with to say, "Do you think this is enough
No.
money? Do you think there was none of that?" So
No, again, what I've heard is that because it was like such a significant financial issue, that all decisions were taken at a ministerial level, and there was no consultation from without of the DFE, just because it was it was an issue about money, and so actually it doesn't matter what people think really, because the money is going to rule the decision making, and I think that reflects. But I still think even in that you can communicate that, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's the same thing every single year.
Yeah.
I think it was Claire said earlier, a couple of years ago, we were in this position where we didn't know. I think, was it 6 months? Was
Yeah.
it 6 months we were waiting to hear? And this time they've actually paused the fund. They've paused applications, they've paused spending, blah, blah. That's just, and I'm not being funny. That's not what this government,
It's not
this
what we'd hoped
party,
for.
that's not what this party stand for.
No.
They they're normally a party that's on the side of the people that need this money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I say, I just wanted to come back to my evidence point to make sure it was clear that I don't believe the government have an evidence base for what they've just done. I do think that there is an evidence base for therapeutic input. Yes, we'd like to see more, but again, why is the government not commissioning that type of research? They should be. I had another point and it suddenly disappeared.
But the research is out there. And if you Google it, you can find it. The research is interesting and it is generally positive, but there is some interesting bits in there that say for really high need families that it's borne no fruit. But that's me just
There's also evidence for high need families that it has borne fruit. I think, but I don't want to get into a back and forth on that.
You'll win, so please don't.
If we take a Treasury decision and we say this is financial decision to save money, I think cutting the fund now, the government will, our children will, our families will pay for that later, and the statistics do back that up.
Yeah.
With children that have to re-enter the care system, Euan has statistics on that and the phenomenal cost of that, and not just financial, the moral, ethical, the cost of the individual child and every family member around them is huge in that sense, and also the criminal justice system, the job market, everything, because
and the implications are high.
And what you're saying there, Claire, as well, that it goes back to another point there, which is, the government has already failed our children if they end up not being back with their birth families. after they've been removed from care, because there's, don't get me wrong, not for every family, not for every single family, but there's not enough money in the pot to support these families to get them back to, how
Yeah.
they should be living. So then they wouldn't need this additional piece. So, they're being failed twice by governments, or maybe more than twice, let's be honest.
Well,
So
this has turned out cheery, hasn't it? But the government notoriously they sort of individual departments to protect their own budget, don't they? So the truth is that they're looking at their budget today, not worrying about what's going to happen next week or next month, unfortunately. I feel like we've taken up lots of your time for an emergency podcast. So is there anything that you'd wanted to say that we haven't asked you, or created a space you can say, Clare and Euan? Awkward pause.
I want to build on the point that Claire was making. This risks whatever happens long term. In the short term, in the next sort of 24 months, we need to see, we need to know what is the plan, and I firmly believe we need to see a reversal of this. I'm very realistic about the likelihood that that'll happen. But knowing how this risks pushing families into crisis, knowing what the impact of that will be for already extremely vulnerable young people and families, it's we can't not ask, even if we don't think we're going to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think even if we don't get to exactly where we want, but I think even if you express the march and the petition expresses the concern, and also hopefully will push them to communicate better at the very minimum.
At the very least, yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose my close would be that I want to remain hopeful that we can affect change. And so, yeah, my ask would be sign that petition, share the petition, and come to our march, because at the very least, hopefully we amplify our voice. We're stronger together. We come together. And let's have that hope that we can achieve a reversal of this decision, and then a proper sector-wide consultation and proper planning and preparation before other changes are made. I'm going to keep hoping, keep believing we can achieve that.
But for anybody who wants to sign the petition, who wants to attend, it's going to be a great day out, by the way. We're going to have a picnic at the end. It's going to be awesome. The website address is asgsfprotest.com. We are on multiple social channels, so please follow us. Please do sign the petition, and please do join us on May the 3rd.
Yeah, you'll find us on Facebook, Action Against ASGSF Changes. And we are on, all of the others, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky. But our wonderful counterpart, Steph, is on those parts and doing a fantastic job.
Excellent. Well, on that note, thank you so much for coming on. You've been really generous with your time, and you've tolerated my level of abrasiveness. So thank you so much for coming on, and we wish you well. And perhaps you can, perhaps once you've had it, you can come back on and tell us how it went and what the day was like, and take some photographs, and you'll be posting them online. And I was thinking, when my children were like late childhood, I should have brought them along, and then there would have been a national incident if I'd let my children loose at Downing Street. So thank you so much, and look after yourselves.
Thank you so much. And love to come back on.
Thanks for coming on, Kelly.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.